Pretty good, pretty good. This hot streak is killing me. The humidity is actually the worst because you can cut a knife with it.
Seriously, it's
But
like, ugh.
I think the most that I'm feeling it right now is at the gym because there's no. It's a warehouse with no AC, so we have high windows and a door open. We have fans just like blowing hot air everywhere. So that and then training with a mask, which is now required. It's just like a wet napkin
What?
on your face, which is not my idea of refreshing, but yeah,
And I can't
to
imagine
each
enough
their own.
oxygen going to your brain while it's not it's soaked. It's like saturated, and then you're
Hmm.
trying to breathe through it. And already it's incredibly hard to breathe through a mask.
Some would call it moist, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Can you?
Yeah.
So you're training. Okay, let's rewind back. I want to start from the beginning here. So, you you are so I excuse me for anything stupid I might say, for not understanding this world that you're in, and I probably
It's
should
okay.
understand this more, but
Well, luckily for you, my job is to explain it to people that don't understand it.
great, that's great. So
So that works out.
um you uh are a Muay Thai practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
You teach, and you also fight. And yeah. So can you just tell me, just what do you do? What's Muay Thai in you? What is that? What is that, Roman? Tell me about it.
Well, Muay Thai is essentially the national sport of Thailand. So if you've ever seen like the old movies like Bloodsport or Kickboxer, a lot of those have some crossover or just take place in Thailand. I mean, they're not the most accurate depiction, but I mean, like any Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, it's hard to really pinpoint exactly what is authentic, I guess.
Right.
Um, but it's kind of like kickboxing, but there's elbows and some like aspects of like sort of wrestling
Hmm.
involved. They call it a clinch, and
Oh, there are grapples. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's sort of like a stand-up wrestling, and then you're using your elbows, your knees, and then if you can within your range, your punches and kicks as well. So
Wow.
um, Muay Thai has been with me. Let's see, 10 years now, 9 years, 10 years. And it started because it was around the time that people were like the other people around me were starting to go to the gym and they were lifting. And I think the most common thing at that time was just having like a bodybuilder routine.
Right.
And everybody's like, this is leg day, this is chest day, and all that. And I was just bored.
Hmm.
And I happened to be going to a Gold's gym at the time, and they had a heavy bag, and I was like, I'm gonna hit it and see what
Cool.
happens. I'll probably look like an idiot, but you know what? It felt great, and I had just had this rush that I didn't have before, and then I started doing some research, and I found a gym that I had a bunch of friends that were teaching at and training at, and I was like, yeah, I'm in. About 3 years, and they actually shut down. So then I happened to have some other friends that I knew back from like college, like, and some people that I work with, and they were going to this other gym that was really close by, and I've been there, yeah, 6 7 years now. Yeah, so it was like family member by family member had gotten sick or had symptoms or something, and they just weren't feeling well. And
Wow.
then as more stuff started to close down, I was like, okay, I can't go home right now. So that 2 weeks eventually turned into 9 weeks because of like the string of like, okay, so my godmother's sick, and then my dad got sick, and then my mom, and then my sister, and then eventually my grandfather, who's 82,
Oh my gosh.
also got sick. And then he had pneumonia, he had a blood clot in his chest. They rushed him to the hospital, and he tested positive for COVID
Oh my
19.
gosh. Wow.
So like while all this stuff is happening, I'm having like identity crisis because the thing that I like love the most and put the most time into is effectively gone until further notice, really shut down until further notice. And then, family's getting sick, like I'm working from home, so then just all that. I was fortunate enough to be rooming with three other people. So in terms of like getting groceries and stuff, we had a routine, like everything was going on pretty well. So we were fortunate enough to, okay, I can make grocery runs for my parents so they don't have to leave. Like when we went food shopping, we'd go to Costco, and then I would drive back to New Jersey to drop off food for them and then come back. So they didn't have to go anywhere. They could just
Hmm.
stay isolated the whole time. Um,
Wow.
so around the 8 or 9, I guess that'd be week 7. Um, was when my grandfather got admitted, and then I went. We waited it out another 2 weeks, and in that 2 weeks, we what do you call it? In the 2 weeks that he was admitted, on that second week was like the earliest window that I can go home. So I went home for like a very short period of time, probably like a week and a half,
Hmm.
and I lucked out and found an apartment, which is where I live now. So I just had to grab all my stuff really quickly, the quickest move I've ever done, just pack up whatever I can and leave the rest. And yeah, so that was about a month, 2 months ago now. I'm not even sure.
Yeah,
Like
it's
I guess
hard to
that
keep track of
was
time during
but
this.
May, June,
Yeah.
July. Yeah, so probably like somewhere in May. That's when I signed May, June. Yeah.
Wow.
So I guess June, July. We're going into August. So
Wow.
I've been here since. So quarantine's been weird. I've been trying to just stay in shape, and running is pretty much the main thing that I've been doing up until about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, that the gym actually opened up partially.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's been I just started teaching it on the weekends, so there's some semblance of normalcy going.
Wow. You're able
Yeah.
to teach in Jersey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, they gave the thumbs up as long as there's no contact. So
Okay.
right now we have heavy bags set up, and they're spaced out, and we have like tape across the mats, and then we have like really rigorous cleaning procedures that happen in between rounds, in between classes, in between days.
Wow.
So for the most part, I I'd stay away from everybody. I can teach from a distance. They can do their thing, and
Hmm.
then they go home. One way
Right.
in, one way out, and we clean all this stuff, and it's ready for the next thing. Um, but I think it was when I finally got home. But when I say home, I mean I was living by myself. That I was
Hmm.
like, okay, now everything is setting in, and all the stuff that you would see people like, okay, they get to the point of quarantine where they're like, oh, now I'm bored and I just want things to go back to normal.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that like, oh, like when is this gonna be over? Like I want to like do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
That hit like really late for me because I was pretty much always in a situation where I was either at home with my parents or like in Brooklyn with friends.
Hmm.
And then when I got home and I lived by myself, I'm like, oh, like this is quarantine.
Yeah.
Like I
Right.
can't
Yeah.
I can't do anything. My gym's not
Yeah.
open. I'm just playing. Like I spent so much time like redecorating my apartment, and it still looks like shit because it's messy. And then I just kind of, I don't know, man. It's so weird to have to like reinvent everything now. It's like
Absolutely.
I gotta live with it now. I
Right.
gotta live with me. It's a nightmare.
Do you? Is it? Can you schedule a fight?
No.
No, because contact.
Um, the only exception is if you're a professional fighter and it's considered essential work,
It's considered.
because that's if you're a professional
Ah.
and that's your only way of making money or your primary source of income, then you're allowed to do your training and you're allowed to do fights.
You see, that's interesting because you think that like it's just it's one person. It's not like you're first of all you're not allowed to have a crowd at all. The UFC is not doing
Correct.
crowds, right? They're
Hmm.
fighting. Like I've been hearing some funny stories about like how that's been going. Like
Yeah,
you could hear the
it's a nightmare.
fighters talk and stuff, and
You hear the
yeah,
coach, you hear the commentators in the back. They're like, "What do you mean I'm losing?" Like,
right.
oh,
Yeah, and so you would think that you would just two people can just agree, we're gonna fight, we're gonna do. Is that would you want it to work that way? What do you think?
there's too many things involved. I mean, like that's like a step up from like a bar fight, dude. Like it's like the whole point of it is to have a rule set and a structure and to be evenly matched with somebody,
Mm,
because it
mm-hmm.
could be unevenly matched one way or the other, because sandbagging is a thing where you'll say, oh, I only have like 5 fights, and then we do some research, it's got like 15.
Right.
So like that's happened where we put a guy in and it's his first fight ever, and this guy's had 5 MMA fights. I'm like, yeah, it's not Muay Thai. You're technically you're right. You have 0 fights in Muay Thai, but
Right. Oh my gosh.
but yeah, so like stuff like that still slips through the cracks, even with a sanctioning body,
Right.
with like the athletic commission. And without that, it's a nightmare, dude. Plus, you don't know who's gonna have it. Like, do you like like more than ever, you have to understand that it's just a health risk. I mean, it's not. Is it
Yes.
is it really worth it? And actually, funny you bring up like the whole MMA thing because I'm having trouble just watching the fights, just based on just based around the politics that they have in terms of like keeping the safety of the health, or like the health of the fighters in mind,
Yeah.
which they're not, and like there's not like a big payout, like it's the top, you know, the top executives that are making money and,
Mhm.
and all those transactions moving around, and then you're fighting for your life, putting your life even more at risk than ever
Mhm.
to make someone else way more money for what?
Right. Right.
You know, some people are still going in and getting knocked out and then testing positive for COVID. Like it's
Oh my gosh, really?
like yeah, and then some fights get canceled or they get pushed. So I'm skeptical about even the procedure of people getting in to fight because they're like, oh, like his coach tested positive, he didn't, it's fine. And then we find out like a week later, it's like right before the like 2 days before the event, like, oh, he tested positive. I'm like, he came in contact with everybody on the roster that was gonna fight that night. So are you really is their health really in your interest, or are you just skimming the bare minimum and then moving the event to just make more money
Mhm.
when everything else is on pause? And it's like, and that sucks because as a fighter, and if I was a professional, it's like yeah, I'd say fuck it. This is what I chose. I got to live with it, and I got to fight. But
Mhm.
like, it's not. Once you step outside of like, oh, okay, like I'm going to be fine. It's like, okay, how many people can I affect as a result? So I think they're sort of missing the mark on that, and that's I mean there's deeper levels to like the political game and how all that's being run. I don't want to get into it, but
Right. Right. Of course.
let's just say I don't support it, and I'm having a hard time watching it right now,
Gotcha.
which
Okay.
sucks because it sucks especially for running an MMA podcast.
So, oh, do you want to drop that for a second? Let me know what that's about.
So I started a podcast called Kicking and Streaming, and the idea was like it was two nerds that also happen to train.
Mhm.
Talk primarily about MMA and stuff that's happening, Muay Thai, kickboxing, which is sort of our bread and butter because he was more jujitsu with some Muay Thai and I'm Muay Thai with some jujitsu.
Mhm.
So there's sort of a balance there. And then at the end, we can nerd out and talk about games that are coming out. It's like a very specific audience, but for the most part, when we talk about MMA stuff, at this point, I'm like, I don't know because I haven't been keeping up on fights.
Right.
Like I just don't feel good about keeping up with fights because even if
Ah.
I'm like allegedly streaming the fight without paying for it,
Mhm.
even if that were the case, there's someone paying for viewership to make that happen,
Right.
and even having them in the discussion just adds more support in that direction. And as a coach, especially, it's on par with me putting
Complicit.
up social media of like if I have a video of me training with no mask on in today's
Mm.
world.
Mhm. 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 Right.
I think it's on the, it's like I have to set some sort of example at this point
Agree.
where
Yeah.
because I have people messaging me but like how do you handle this? How do you do that? And if I'm just like, yeah, totally I'm gonna watch the fights and train without a mask and do this and that, it's like I don't know who that's going to affect. So I can't stop it, but I can help prevent it from spreading. Just
Sure.
you know.
So,
So
you mentioned how important. Earlier, you said you put all of your time into this. You'd say that we've had talks before, like
mhm.
where you've told me how important this is to you, and outside of your job, this is your life is Muay Thai, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. And so with that all, even with all of that, still with all of that, you're able to keep this kind of like clear-headedness about, yeah, this is actually what's right and what's wrong at this time. And even though this is my life and I want to be fighting, I want to be training at the normal way I was training before, uh, that is not overriding this like overarching principled need to be principled.
Yeah, I guess I could. All right, so I guess I'll come out and say something I haven't actually said before out loud. Anyway,
Oh, okay.
so this year I was planning to be my last year of fighting.
Really?
So I had a tournament in May, which should have been like 3 or 4 fights in a weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and then the last 6 months or so of the year, I was gonna do maybe a couple more fights. Because then I'm 2-3, so I've had 5 amateur fights, and if you add 4 or 5, 6 more to that, then I'm at like what 10,
Hmm.
11 fights, something like that.
Right. Okay.
Once you're in that territory, you have to make a decision.
Oh.
Do I want to keep fighting amateur? And some people do up until like 30 fights.
Okay.
But at the same time, I've been taking so much damage over the years that like I can't reasonably sustain it because I started pretty late. I think I was 24 or 25,
Oh, that's late. Okay.
which is pretty late for the fight game. And so I'd already sustained like a handful of injuries going in, and then I'm not getting any younger. And they talk about peak performance being at like in your 30s, like early 30s,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
then we have quarantine, so I couldn't figure that out if I wanted to.
Right.
Um, and then to take that time off in which I was like, well, maybe I only have like a couple of years left to just try to do this thing, and then focus all my energy on like teaching and maybe creating content for for the gym or for the sport. Um, so it sort of fast tracked that because I didn't have anything planned beyond this year. I was like, well, no, this is about it, and then I have to ask myself like, what's the next thing that I want to do? So I've been focusing more. I mean, we've had nothing but time, so I've been focusing more on my career and where my priorities are at, and
Hmm.
having fun with like streaming and doing quirky things. But it's been I've y- I think part of it too is that I spent a lot of time, and I am spending a lot of time with myself.
Hmm.
Because even though stuff has opened up, like I might order delivery, I might go get coffee,
Hmm.
but aside from that, I don't really have a lot of human interaction. So I've had a lot of time to collect and figure things out, and it's going to be like this for a while.
Right.
So like where are my priorities going to be if I have to reset essentially the next like 3 years of goals that I had lined up?
Yeah.
So it's about maintaining balance and figuring out like what's really important for you, and a big part of that is actually how my coaches push us to read more and to make sure we have a consistent set of goals, like short term and long term. Like, what do you want to do this year, this month, this week, in 5 years? And it's funny because just about 5 years ago, when we started putting goals out, and like
Hmm.
when I was just first started fighting, I was like, I knew where I wanted to be and what I wanted to be able to do. I was like, I don't know, fight a few more times, maybe teach, maybe coach a fighter, and then I had just like this like list of like let's say 5 or 6 things,
Hmm.
and I was like, hey, uh, I didn't really keep track of them, but I hit all the goals
Hmm. Hmm.
right on that time frame, and I'm like, I gotta set new ones, and now's a better time than ever to be able to set new goals and figure out what I want to do. But it's been tough, dude. I just You just got to take it day by day. That's the best way I can come up with it. It's
Right.
like anything. It's gonna be a long haul, but it'll be worth it.
So if you so you're deciding maybe this will be the year that you stop, right? But so will COVID will COVID delay that another year? So like okay, next year you'll come back, you do one more year. Let's say it's over. Let's just pretend we know that it's going to be over next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It may never be over, right?
Spoiler alert.
That's how I'm
Um,
kind of living life, and I've kind of like I've had my little existential crisis about that, but that's
yeah.
probably not over yet. But and like what do I do with my life? I thought I was going to do this. Okay. Well, you must be having that in your own way, right? So, yeah. How? So do you delay it? Do you just like, oh, I'll just wait. I'll just wait. I'll delay that year. I'm just gonna do next year.
I mean, it depends on how I feel. Um, I've had the time to actually relax, recoup, and like find sleep again, and
Yeah,
and
you do a lot.
try
Yeah.
to yeah, I feel very different. It's a very different pace because I was used to just running around all the time, and I like barely drive my car. Like I happen to be in Queens this weekend to
Mhm.
help somebody move, but aside from that, my car I'm within a very small radius of like where I would be working if the office was open, where the gym is, where my parents are, and
Mhm.
like where majority of my friends. I'm like right smack in the middle, so I
Right.
never really have to go more than like 10 miles.
Yeah.
So once you take that out of the equation, you add more time back into your day for the commute,
Mhm.
not doing anything on the weekends.
Right.
Like, I just have all of this time, so I definitely work at a different pace. So I don't know. I don't know what that looks like because it'll come and go in phases. Fighting is like the last thing that's gonna come up. So I mean, if that happens in the next 4 years, I don't know. It depends on how I feel, how I'm training, who's
Hmm.
around me, and I don't know. I don't have a clear goal for it
Right. How could you? There's no
because
clear
yeah,
knowledge of what it's gonna be, right?
who knows, dude?
It's almost like crazy to think in that way. Like, oh, if I, it's like saying, oh, if I had $1 million, what would I do? It's like, well, you know what? You don't right now, right? So like, let's just be
Yeah.
realistic about what we have right now. So, like, from that perspective, Muay Thai is a huge part of your life, and so what do you want to be doing with Muay Thai? You've had all these fights. Um, how do like did you when you finished doing those fights, was it like, oh man, like even that first one, you're like, oh, that's exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for that moment. uh in my mind, in my layman mind, I've never fought before. I've taken a couple classes in fighting and this and that. I know nothing really, but I was like, oh, how great would it be to have that fight that day that I got to fight. And yeah, I would just think that, oh, I'd crave that all the time once I got it one time, or I would just at least crave to do it once. Yeah.
You know, it's funny you mention it. I don't like fighting.
Oh my
Um,
god, very
like
interesting. So they're
like
different
I
for you.
enjoy the training and playing around and stuff, and then like I
Uh-huh.
get to the day and I can't wait for the day to be over. Like I have fun in there,
Yeah.
but it's just like it's not. I don't know. Like when it's done, I'm like, yeah, we're gonna do this a couple more times, and I've never been like, oh, like I can't wait to get to the day. Like I don't see. And I think part of that is I've been so like structured to focus on more of the journey and just getting better.
Right.
So
Right.
while each fight is sort of like a milestone of getting better, if I don't keep myself accountable year round, then the long term goal isn't even going to be there.
Right.
So it's like fighting's cool. You don't need it to be knowledgeable in the sport. Um, Not necessarily. Like you can be a great coach, and honestly, I aspire more to change people in that way than from fighting. I think for me personally, I can have a bigger impact than somebody would being like the best of the best. Like I could be great, but I would hate it.
Hmm.
And
Really?
then at that point, then I would probably essentially resent the sport
Huh.
because I would just pour all my energy into this thing that would eventually turn that love into resentment. I know, and I feel that way, like pretty much after every single fight. Like even if I win, I'm like,
Hmm.
what's
Wow.
the next thing though? Like I'm so focused on like what's next that like when I win, I'm like, how fast can we do that again?
Wow. Right. And
And
you.
like, and I usually prioritize stuff that happens in life way before I even look at fighting. Like I love the training, but like really teaching, coaching, and like bringing that to people because it changes how drastically they perceive their day-to-day lives. And like
Yes.
not everybody has to be a fighter. You can just train on a regular basis, but they're
Right.
just like, dude, like all this changes like the way that I think, the way that I eat. So I mean, being a trainer, being a personal trainer, coaching, helping fighters get through stuff, like that's really my bread and butter. Like fighting is great, but
Hmm.
you know, um I prefer that also more like commentary stuff. So what ended up happening was I became friends with one of the promoters, and he had me commentate a couple of the events. So I was doing color commentary
I can imagine you'd be very good at that.
with a
Yeah.
person, and again because I had that sort of advantage of like, okay, like have experience and I fought, and I'm kind of a nerd about it specifically because I have to teach it. And like I think with our style in particular, I have like in terms of because it's traditional in a sense that it has to come from somewhere,
Hmm.
and it's not like there's a deep history in the sport, and out of the respected gyms, like their history comes from somewhere. So some legendary fighters, some legendary coach,
Mm-hmm.
somebody that comes from what they call the golden era of Muay Thai, which is like the late 80s, early 90s, where everybody was the best of the best. and it wasn't so influenced by gambling like it is today.
Ah.
So that's an interesting aspect. So actually in Bloodsport, this is the only thing they really depicted properly was they get to the arena and they show the shot of the crowd, and majority of the crowd is like waving up numbers, and
Mm-hmm.
they have their phones out, or maybe not phones, but they had like
Cameras.
a
Yeah.
board out.
Gotcha.
They had a board and like whatever, and they're just like, yeah, I'm gonna, So they're betting on the fighters, which greatly influenced it late '90s into the 2000s, and then it'll also introduce a lot of corruption as a result.
Right.
So if you ever watch any Muay Thai fight traditionally with traditional rules in Muay Thai, so Lumpini Stadium, Rajadamnern Stadium, like any major stadium fight, you'll notice the first 2 rounds they're doing next to nothing.
Okay.
So if you've never seen the sport before, this will look incredibly weird because you watch kickboxing, right from the jump, they're like ba 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 ba
Right.
ba ba ba. Muay Thai, they're like maybe a kick, and it's like 10%, maybe a jab. All right, cool. Just kind of like waiting around, jab. All right, nothing.
Sure.
And part of that is like the gamblers getting settled in to figure out who they're gonna put money on, and like they'll look at the small nuances to figure out this guy looks strong, this guy looks balanced, blah blah blah. I like this guy, and let's sort of have a discussion around it, and then put money on that person. And then third, fourth, fifth round, that's where the action really is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So because of that structure, they've adjusted the way they fought, and also how things get scored, and with people like throwing fights and all this crazy shit happening, like it's really changed the sport for the worse. Where they're still the best of the best, but if I'm gonna quote one of the greatest of all time, Samart, Samart.
Smart. Okay.
I'm not gonna pronounce the last name. I can lie to you.
Okay.
He was one of the greatest Muay Thai fighters of all time, and also
Sure.
transitioned to boxing, which is unheard of, and dominated in boxing in Thailand as well. And I
Really?
think across. So he was one of the few cases to be able to do that, and is considered one of the smartest fighters around. And
I
when
gotta
they
look into
interviewed
this
him,
guy.
he said, "Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I'll give you the whole list of names."
Please.
But during a recent interview, I think probably in the last like 3 or 4 years or something, he said that Muay Thai is going to belong to the foreigners in a couple of years based on how it's going.
Really?
So he's
Huh.
like, they're just getting better, they're getting smarter, they're training harder, or like more efficiently, and the Thais aren't going to be able to keep up on a long enough scale. So it's going to belong to the foreigners soon. So it's I mean, I think part of that too is he's seeing the transition into MMA and how mainstream that's gone, and Muay Thai doesn't have that kind of support. Like if you think like MMA fighters are struggling when like some like you still have some fighters, like granted it's the top 0.1% making millions of dollars in a
Yeah.
fight, or half a thousand or half a million or whatever it is in a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Muay Thai is nowhere near those numbers. There's no fighter that makes that money. There's no Muay Thai fighter that makes that money unless they transition to MMA.
Right.
Like
Right.
I can't think of any like crazy prize fight that wasn't like a long ass tournament, which in a tournament, that means you're fighting multiple times in a night. And people forget that that's a thing that happens. Because like, oh, you got one fight. It's like, no, you do a tournament. You might have 5, depending on how well you do or how many people are in the tournament and stuff like that. So that's the hard part about it, is like it's such a niche
Right.
sport.
Right.
It's so
Yeah.
specific that it's beautiful in and of itself, but it's like the hipster martial art in a sense. It's not like it's not that obscure, but in terms of relevance, like most people still don't know about it. And that's where I come in, hopefully. I don't know. Maybe I can teach more about it.
From my perspective as kind of like, a very casual, like, I kind of hear about the big fights and in fighting in MMA. I always hear Muay Thai is the go-to for learning about striking, and that's usually what everybody always says. Oh, you do your Muay Thai, you do your Jiu-Jitsu, and I always hear Muay Thai, and Muay Thai always was the more interesting one for me. I never got a chance to go ahead and follow through with that. But I always wanted to. That was the one I was always actually interested in the most. So I just thought it was so cool when I found out that you were like so involved in this world. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Can't wait till I do that. And then like my shoulder is injured to hell. So I was like, oh man, that sucks. I want to train, but I can't even do that. But so from my perspective, people talking about Muay Thai nonstop. When I listen to Rogan, he talks about Muay Thai all the time. He has these guys. He had one fighter who's who's in UFC, and he went to Thailand, he lives in Thailand, and he trains there just to get his striking to that like super high level.
Probably Kali Roundtree.
Yeah, that's it. That's him.
Um,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And so I thought
yeah,
that,
and his like his kicks instantly got better, and I was like, yeah, that sounds all right. He went
yeah.
to a legitimate gym for a while, and then he switched off. But um,
Oh, did he? Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
I forget where he's at now. But the thing about Muay Thai is
Hmm.
it's sort of a hybrid from what most people understand martial arts to be. So
Right.
it's not fancy
Gotcha.
for the most part. It's very practical in at least for sport, I should say.
For sport. Okay.
Um, so when people talk about how you're gonna mix it up, and like Muay Thai, Jiu Jitsu seem to be like the two most common
Right.
to go to. You have an exceptionally round base because Muay Thai has clinching, which most sports don't have.
Right.
Like unless you're like a sambo slash MMA fighter, like which is another good combination. Like Muay Thai will keep you very tight in the clinch. So if your stand up wrestling is like that, and you want to maintain that control and that balance, Muay Thai has that. If you want to work on your striking, so your boxing, elbows, your knees, and your kicks, Muay Thai has all those things.
Okay.
When you get to the ground, your jiu-jitsu will take over. Jiu-jitsu and wrestling.
Right.
So because Muay Thai has those aspects built into it, it allows you to have more of a diverse range of attacks. And then when you grappling kicks in, then you have your wrestling and other things too. So like in the MMA world, off the top of my head, I would say Edson Barboza is a good example. Jose Aldo. Well, I'm losing some names right now. But there's a bunch that like have that well-rounded. Well, I mean, Israel Adesanya is going to be up there too because he was a kickboxer, and he transitioned very well into MMA, and is the current middleweight champion.
Wow.
It's 185, yeah, middleweight, I believe. And he actually his one of his most recent fights, he knocked out Robert Whitaker, which people didn't think was going to happen. But shout out to the skinny guys, man. This guy's got some serious power in there. But the point being that like you see like the small techniques, and it's so detailed because it's only the basics.
Hmm.
Like anything, people can sort of convolute it and blow it up to something that's super fancy and like flying knees and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, it's the
Yeah.
stuff you see in movies, but
Ong back.
I've all seen people.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen people get knocked out trying to do a flying knee, and it took one punch. They just walked into it.
Right.
So it's like some of those aspects are there, and some of the traditional parts of the fight um, actually take the sport away from general airtime. So there's a whole like sort of like dance that happens between like before the fight. So sometimes you'll see like I don't know, like a 10-minute. It's almost like they're so the Ramoy Y crew is how you is the dance that essentially you're paying respect to your trainers
Oh, really?
and your coaches, and then you're gonna seal the ring, and then you sort of keep the bad spirits out, and you say, okay, we seal the ring, it's just you and me right now, and then touch gloves and you beat the shit out of each other.
That's
But
kind of
that can
beautiful.
take
Wow.
like that can take like 10 minutes. Like there's like a whole thing, the slow song plays, and then and then depending on what gym you're coming from, that does vary, and everybody has their own individual touch to it. But that's not good for mainstream TV because people are going to be like, if you've never seen the sport before, like, why are they dancing? I want to see some blood, you know?
Right. That's fascinating. That's wow.
Um,
Yeah. I didn't know that there was there's a lot of kind of tradition wrapped around it.
yeah.
Is there like philosophy as well in there, and uh maybe because you it sounds like there's a lot of that, like when you're talking about being a coach for someone, being a teacher. It sounds like I feel like joining any kind of like martial art or anything, and joining a school, and that could be transformative for anybody, but in a lot of ways, you get community, and you get kind of direction, and you get exercise, which is all really good,
Yeah.
but is there a philosophy or anything that comes along with it that you kind of have picked up along the way, or have seen?
I think it's just deep rooted because historically it's deep rooted with traditionally Buddhist country
Ah, okay.
that there's some crossover. I don't know how deep the water is in terms of how much crossover there is into Buddhism.
Mhm.
Aside from the specific forms that you work on, until you dig into the super traditional like Muay Baran, which is more like the unbox stuff that you've seen,
Mhm.
where he's like tiger whips his tail and I don't know,
Right.
elephant gets his money back. I don't know, like whatever those like forms that he has, like all those things are very very old school and go back to the War of Siam and
Oh, really?
like those are the traditional ties of Muay Baran, and then they translated that into a sport which became Muay Thai.
Right.
So the originally, I mean, they even had weapons. So, like they would have like if you can imagine like a billy club, you have the handle, but the bar was here, and
Right.
instead of a bar, it's like a blade. So like they would use that in terms of defense. And when they turned into a sport, essentially it was like it was very Mortal Kombat. It was like, okay, we're gonna have a guy fight everybody else, and who's the best one, and that's your strongest fighter.
Wow.
And it wasn't to the death as far as I know, but it was pretty much like, okay, someone might have to fight 10 dudes and like be the best of that. And then they're like, oh, we can make money off of this. I don't know. However it became a sport after that. But
Right.
they modified it, added gloves, you know, and and yeah, I mean, like because they were so invested in that becoming a sport, I think every once in a while you'll see certain fighters with a shaved head and shaved eyebrows, and then all of a sudden they're a monk. I don't know exactly. I don't know the detail of that. I just know that it's a very common occurrence to see like your favorite fighter. Oh, he's got no eyebrows right now. He's like off in a temple right now.
Wow.
And I've heard the comparison that it's like going to confession because if you just like fucked up or something, and they're
Mhm.
like, oh no, I'm just gonna clean up real quick and then I'll come back to where I was.
Right. Right.
And I was like, it's such a common occurrence. I'm like, is that about the extent or like the depth of what it is? Like, I go to confession, I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not gonna be any better after this, but it's nice to feel good after the fact.
Right.
Um, because they just go back to like they're like partying and everything, and
Mhm.
it's just so ingrained to their culture. I think like when I mentioned, or if we talk about philosophy about around the sport of Muay Thai, the simplest the simplest way I can sort of describe it, and it's the same as most hard workouts, but the thing is, being a martial art, there is the art aspect of it. When it's done correctly with proper technique
Gotcha.
and over time, you appreciate those particular things because anybody can hit hard. They can learn to hit hard, but can you do it gracefully? Can you do it with great timing and
Mm.
balance? Like that's what makes it performance. That's what judges see.
Right.
Like you can kick really hard, but if you fall over doing it, I'm not giving you a point because you,
Uh-huh.
you fell. Like, yeah, you might have done some damage, but guy can't hold his own. And the combination of that being like ever present is sort of what makes it kind of philosophical
Mhm.
because it takes all the bullshit away. I think that like after a
Right.
hard train session, like especially now with the mask on, you're thinking, I just want to be able to breathe. Like I don't care about like if I get hit, I don't care if well, I just want I want to survive and like B, I need like water and air.
Mhm.
Um and because it takes all those things away, you have no choice, but you have to be present.
Right.
The thing about the hardest workout or sport or anything you've ever played, and your body's just looking for survival. You don't
True.
think about anything else. Like whatever problems you had that day, they're gone. Like whatever was looming around in your head, they're gone.
Right.
And when you take that and somebody who's just having a hard day and like, listen, we'll hit the bag, we'll hit some pads, let's work through this. Like as a coach, yeah, I'm trying to kill them. Don't get me wrong, but we're gonna make it pretty.
Right.
And then however you experience that, you have that sort of like outer body experience of like, oh, okay, like I feel light, and you have like that workout high, like to have like runner's high. It's the same thing. It's just a little bit more brutal, I think.
Yeah.
Unless you're like
Definitely.
an ultra marathon or like an Ironman like runner, that's different.
Yeah. Those
Swimming to
are.
Alcatraz and stuff like that. Yeah,
That's
that's
another
a
thing.
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you
but it's the same feeling on a different scale, I'd say.
do you feel like do you wish that Muay Thai came into your life earlier?
I wonder that. I want to say yeah, but every time I spend time thinking about like, oh, like coulda, woulda, shoulda,
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like,
Right.
well, there's a lot of things I wish I could have just known earlier. And it's
Of
like, no,
course.
dude, everybody just has their path. So
Yeah.
I don't even think about it at that point because it's like, well, I could. I could just be reading or something. I don't know. Play
Right.
video games.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
all this time, I could just be this.
You could be doing
Like
something
it's
else. Yeah.
a yeah, absolutely. It's a thought to have. But in any context, it's just the same thing. It's like, oh, I wish I could have. It's the same deal.
Yeah.
It's like I got here how I got here, and I don't. As far as I don't have any real regrets.
That's
So
staying present, I think, and I think that kind of goes along with the presence that being involved in the sport brings. I think
yeah,
that kind of, you practice that, right? Like they're like, oh, I have to be here. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be there in the past, so why would I sit in the past and
yeah.
think about that? And so what do you think that so there was never in your mind this time where you're like, okay, I want to take this, and I'm sorry if this is a dumb question, but I'm full of dumb questions. You wanted to take that, and I'm just thinking from my perspective. I was like, oh, I want to take that, and I want to enter the mixed martial arts arena. I wanted
Hmm.
to enter that because you're a fan of that stuff too.
Oh yeah,
So yeah,
oh yeah.
so
I've competed separately, and I am sort of a purist in that way. I'm not in the camp of saying like MMA is like a bastardization of the sport. I just
mhm.
think it's a separate sport.
Right.
And I've been asked several times to be able to do so from different countries, different coaches over the years.
Hmm.
And I've said no because I had such a late start. Like it's not sustainable. It's like it'd be entertaining. Don't get me
Right.
wrong. I would have fun with it for forever that time frame is. But for me, if it doesn't pan out or work for me long term, and I'm effectively doing more damage to my body in the meanwhile, probably not worth it for me
Hmm.
to get like a couple fights in maybe, and then not go pro.
Um.
Um, yeah, go.
So, are any of the folks that you're coaching? Do they want? Are they like, oh, Muay Thai is a subset of my skill set that I'm building out?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We have the guys at Silver Fox that work with us in their jiu-jitsu gym, and I think two of their pro fighters, and I think three of their amateur fighters work with us. Three of their pro fighters, maybe four. I work with one, my private sessions. I work on mostly pretty much all of the stand-up stuff, and then we try to transition it more into MMA. So we make some adjustments here and there, but I'm primarily there to sharpen up a stand-up. So like that's sort of the direction I wanted to go in, and it just when I stopped forcing it and being like, oh, we got to do blah, 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 and like I just sort of let it happen. I got a call one day and they're like, hey, like, do you want to help so and so get ready for his fights? I'm like, fuck yeah, I do. Like, that's
Hmm.
absolutely what I want to do.
Right.
It hurts. Don't get me wrong. My joints hurt, but being
Wow.
that guy to push you and like make you better, and then I want to be the guy that you have nightmares about, and then if you fix something, like, oh, your hand drops, you're like, oh shit, he's gonna yell at me again. Like, I want to be that guy, and I am for
Really?
for yeah, I mean, I just think that's what ultimately makes you better.
Right.
It's not even necessarily fear, it's accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about, like some people will even go as far as saying like I hate you for this, but also I kind of love you for this because it made me better or whatever it was.
Right.
And I'm not always right. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not like everything I do is perfect, but I understand that the things that I do have an effect or consequence outside of myself in that capacity. So I feel like I have some influence, and I hate that phrase because of social media has ruined
Yeah,
it.
I hate that phrase too. Yeah, yeah, isn't that a
But
terrible
I
word? Yeah.
but I have that influence on at least a subset of people that will invariably pay for me to yell at them.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take up too much of your time here, but I just wanted to know, and I know that we just talked about how you're very present and you're not thinking coulda, woulda, shoulda, blah blah blah, but like something that runs through my head, and maybe this is not your experience all the time, is this idea that okay, this is happening right now. We're in this situation, right, that we're in, and because of that, we're not having a pure talk about you and Muay Thai, because we're kind of having to confront it in a different way because of
Hmm.
what's happening. It's kind of weird, but it's kind of like it's presented to us, so we have to. The obstacle is the way here, I guess, right? So this obstacle might exist for me, like I think to myself, with my future goals, with things I want to accomplish, things I just want to be doing with my life, like because what I'm doing right now is going to affect, you know, is because of what I think I'm going to be doing later. I expect I'm gonna have a week where I'm gonna be, at home and I'm gonna be able to, work on stuff on the computer or something. I know I'm gonna have that time because I know I'm not gonna be able to go out. So in the
Hmm.
future, you think to yourself, okay, this is so important to me. This is such a big part of my life. I don't really think I'm going to be fighting anymore. It's not really a big thing for me. Um, I want to see what you think about the future. What if this doesn't end for the next couple years? And what do you think? Where would, what do you think you would do with it? Like, it's a hard question. I'm sorry. I probably should have told you to, about it before. But like, what do you think? Just offhand, like off your head, have you been thinking about that? Like, what's gonna happen? Like, am I just gonna be coaching? Am I gonna be virtual coaching? Am I gonna be like, tele coaching from, the thing like, oh, do this, and you'll,
Yeah.
like it's yeah, and it's like, what if people can't fight? And like, it's like, okay, fine, we'll just train people. What do you think? What do you think about the future?
Well,
What's your future here? If COVID never ends, quarantine never
I mean,
ends.
I had like I said, I previously had a game plan and had to spend this time sort of realigning all the different goals that I had in
Yeah.
mind. And I I do have, as present as I try to stay, I have to think, okay, at least generally I'll be there, and I could set it and just lose the piece of paper or whatever forever. But the short answer is like I'll see what happens in the next year or two. I don't really see anything changing in terms of fighting. I don't think I think I have to sort of close that chapter
Mhm.
in the book and figure out what's next for me. And a, I've been okay. Like I got to work on how do I be more of me, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah. Right.
Because being a huge part of my identity, it's like I have to reinvent myself in the way too.
Yes.
So I've been trying to figure out how and where to spend my time. And it sort of ended up being with the people that I care about the most and checking in with them and see how they're going and listening in. I started taking an improv class because I heard that's a good one too.
Yeah, I did a
So I have
lot
an
of
improv class
that. Yeah.
every, yeah, I
Yeah.
got one. I got one happening every Tuesday. It's happening over Zoom, which is fun.
Interesting. That's fun.
Um, and they're all like lovely people, and going to just meet like, yeah, I mean, like I just have I don't really have it like if this then that. It's like, well, we'll see what happens in the next year or two. But
Right.
I think about the long term stuff. Like I would move to Denver because I've been in, and I thoroughly enjoy the moderate isolation, but also like health conscious.
Right.
Like for like bike paths everywhere. They can
Yeah.
handle snow, unlike New Jersey.
Right.
Um, and just chill at like that altitude and have a view, and then that's it. If I ever figured out like what's simple, what do I like, and where do I want to be, it's like some place like Denver.
That's
And yeah, I don't know. It seems like such a random thing, but so that actually started because one of our ex amateur fighters, he was a personal trainer full time. Like he worked at like 24-hour fitness and like was
wow.
getting me into like personal training, and that's sort of how I started like my certification and stuff like that, so I
Right.
could take more clients and things. And it kind of got me to where I'm at with being able to take private sessions and train people and do more like strength and conditioning kind of type of work and actually know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And he moved to Denver, and I was like, it's random as fuck. But he told me about like everybody's healthy there. Like Whole Foods is one of many Whole Foods types of
Gotcha.
places because of
Gotcha.
how fresh like the produce and like everything is, and like and you ride your bike everywhere, and it's a totally different pace, and it's not exactly a New York pace, like there's really nothing like the New York pace.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and if I'm thinking like super duper long term, like yeah, I would probably just if I don't move to like Thailand, then
Mhm.
I'd probably live in like Denver, like some super chill place.
Have you contemplated that? Thailand?
Thailand, I've had opportunities.
Have
I've
you
turned them
been?
all down. Yeah,
Have you been
three
there?
times.
3 times. How?
Three
What was?
three times a month apiece.
Do you have a couple more minutes? I just want to hear about Thailand. I just want to hear about
Oh,
that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, I would rack up all my vacation time and just go to Thailand for a month.
Wow.
And
How
and it's,
cool.
it's my and I go. It's my birthday month, so I would go every February, and then I ended up changing jobs, so I couldn't do that anymore. But it was just to focus on the training and like, okay, like this is the skill work that I have to do and live that fighter lifestyle and figure out if I wanted it or not.
Right.
And that's where I got the most clarity. I was like, I don't want to fucking do
You're
this.
right.
Like,
Clarity.
nobody wants to do this. I was like, well, I got the training, I get to relax, and now like I'm already like, where do I retire and just like chill out here and get fat? Like, be one of
Yeah.
the fat trainers, just holds pads for everybody.
Sounds the
But the
best.
like culturally, I love a lot of things about being in Thailand and being Asia in general. I'm definitely overdue for a trip to the Philippines, but with the current state plus on the government state and all the politics happening in there, it's probably not a good idea to go.
Mm.
Um, but pretty much the two only places would be somewhere in Thailand around where I was, and then probably Denver, you know, if I'm
Wow.
thinking long term. But yeah, the Thailand's great, dude. Great food. Get to hang out and just you can make a choice and say, okay, I'm gonna do the same three things every day, or you could try to learn the language and like immerse a little bit. But if you're not fluent in Thai, you can get away with just not talking to anybody. So you can be around a bunch of people and never have to talk to anybody.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I think that's like a weird line of isolation that I enjoy.
Yeah.
It's like people watching, but from a like a social distance, if you will.
Oh
And
God.
I didn't mean
Yeah.
to play that pun, but
Yeah. Right.
um, which you can put in the context of like other countries. So I just, the idea of like traveling and just embracing other people's culture
Hmm.
has always been fascinating to me. But I just wanted to live somewhere for an extended period of time. But
Right.
next best thing is dash person for all this time and wondering why, X, Y, or Z happened. And then I can only focus now on just being better as myself. And
Right.
then, what else do I really have like power over to change? Like I don't have the control to really change anything else. So when I talk about environment, like I could physically move to another location.
Right.
And that's something that I can control. And whatever happens in that location will be greatly influenced by the things that happen in that environment. So if I end up in a different culture, like yeah, I mean things are gonna change. I'll probably have maybe an accent and like a tan.
Right.
Um, but ultimately, I try to get away from okay, like it's like that pioneer mentality of like okay, I have my survival things. Like I'm not gonna starve to death. Like I have shelter.
Right.
I have some social circles to some extent. So like what outside of that, those things that I need for survival, like what else can I do with this time and resources? So part of that when I think about environment and like, oh, I could change X, Y, and Z, or I could do different things. I also think I'm technically for what I do, I'm in the wrong market anyway. Just, being that it's way more popular in what would be Asia
Hmm.
and really any other place that's not like the middle of nowhere, New Jersey.
Right. Right.
So that's sort of my thought process on it. It's like, okay, this is how I'm gonna sort of change the world
That's
my own strange way.
um.
And we're just talking about Muay Thai. We didn't even talk about the other stuff yet.
Right. We have not. I feel like we have to have more than one of these conversations here
Oh
because
yeah,
there's a
of
lot.
course.
There's a lot to
Yeah.
unpack. You know, I guess I want to leave it on this. So, if do you think um that Muay Thai I don't understand. This is the one thing I don't get. I think Muay Thai is super cool. I was super into like after especially after I saw the movie Yong Bak, I was like, "Oh, the Muay Thai all the way," right? And then I saw the
Yeah.
strike. I would watch videos of people practicing. I'm like, "Kicks and punches. I'm all about this." You know what I mean? Like like
Yeah.
video
Yeah.
games, all that stuff. Like but jujitsu, but jujitsu is super popular and it's all grappling and all that stuff. Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think that there's so many jujitsu gyms compared to Muay Thai in America, or at least Jersey? I don't know. They're like at every corner you find a jujitsu gym, and I feel like why would like Muay Thai is it's you got striking. You mentioned that you have the clinch. You have this and
Yeah.
but people know it as the striking sport, right? That's what people know it as. So you would think people would be like, I want to go find more gyms that have that. You know what I mean? So you
Mm.
find like a bunch of taekwondo is everywhere, everywhere. That's what I did when I was a kid, and I wasn't like, it was cool. I wasn't like thrilled about it. And then But like, yeah, why is that? What's the heck? What the heck? Why isn't it more popular? I think it's cool. I think it's awesome. I think a lot of people think it's cool too.
Yeah, I think it showed up at the wrong time in terms of like hitting mainstream just because MMA and really took over.
Right.
And jiu-jitsu gyms specifically made it to America way earlier. That's number one.
Ah, okay.
Two, they have two major cultures that it sort of stems from. So we primarily know like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which comes from the Gracie family. So Helio
Right.
Gracie and like his huge string of family members that just pass it on that way. So
Right.
they're just like
Yeah.
this crazy like pay it forward type of thing. But even before that, it came from like a smaller Japanese man.
Mhm.
So you have the Japanese culture, which loves like their wrestling, loves like their grappling,
Mhm.
and several other martial arts. You spread that out, and then you have the Gracies that take over, and then go through all that, and then on top of that, they land in MMA, and the first guy to win a UFC fighter is a Gracie.
Yeah. Right.
So
Yeah.
the UFC event is Gracie. So Jiu-Jitsu spreads like wildfire. It's not until later on that they figure out, oh, like strikers can sort of compete with grapplers. It's like, okay, like they're not going to get you on the ground if you have decent defense. You just kick them in the head, you're good to go.
Right. Yeah. That'll do
Um,
something.
and then Muay Thai started popping up a little bit more. So it's definitely, wouldn't say it's on par. I understand the seeing a lot more jiu-jitsu gyms, but structurally, you would probably just based on like how often coaches pop up, and having a ranking system probably helps its marketing
Mhm.
because Muay Thai has no ranking system.
Mm.
And if it does, it's bullshit. I know because I went to a gym for 3 years that had one. And then I was
Right.
like, I didn't learn any of the shit. Just and I learned like the first 2 days of this other gym.
Mm. Mm.
So it's so like gate kept. That's not really a good word for it, but like there's such a gatekeeper for learning
Mhm.
that because they're so obsessed with like the purity of it. And I think
Mm.
jujitsu is more fluid in that we just try to take it and make it better. Where Muay Thai is like, no, we have traditional way of doing it.
Mhm.
That's it. And then people
Yeah.
sort of kind of break away from that, but you don't have any credibility because it could be some random guy that opens up a Muay Thai gym that says he knows what he's talking about and
Right.
whatever. And now that happens more because of the context of MMA, but because jiu-jitsu, I think maybe the main driving point would have been ranking system because always a black belt under X, Y, and Z and
Right.
blah 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 whatever, and people get sold in that kind of stuff. But
They like progression. They like a
yeah,
game almost. So leveling
plus
up. And
they would understand wrestling more than they would Muay Thai
right.
or
That's what I would say.
kickboxing.
Yeah. Right.
So because America has a great wrestling base and not so much a great kickboxing base,
Right.
you're going to be more familiar. Oh, this is like wrestling, except you get choked out and whatever.
Right.
Versus like like the kickboxing stuff. Like I see that with like it was kind of a bad look when they had like really long like flashy pants and like I just think of Rex Kwon Do and laugh every single time. But I think that's a pretty as like satirical as it was. It's a pretty accurate depiction of what like Middle America sees kickboxing as. It's like the
Gotcha.
Rex Kwon Do with like the American flag pants and just it's like some white guy teaching like an Asian martial art. I'm like, yeah, I sure, kind of
Mm.
like there's a questionable sense of at least for me, at least what I value if I go to a gym, I try to see like what the history of whatever it is going in. Some like I don't I feel like some people go in like, oh, like is it a good workout? And I'm like, not my first question, but
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what
so
people do.
yeah, but the stuff that I get at the gym, it's like it's as people learn about it, yeah, that's what makes it sort of like a hipster martial art in that sense. It's like it's kind of there, but it's kind of not, and it'll never. Unfortunately, I don't think it'll ever get big, like as far as like UFC big.
Mhm.
It's close because of how ONE FC is handling it, and sometimes Bellator with Bellator kickboxing. But
Mhm.
if you've ever seen a ONE FC event, they mix up like the whole night, maybe all MMA, or it might be all kickboxing
Mm.
or Muay Thai, or they'll have like here's an MMA fight followed by a kickboxing fight, followed by a Muay Thai fight, followed by a tournament. Like
Mm.
they have jam packed, and they have the huge audience to be able to do so. So if anybody's doing it better, it's going to be ONE FC.
Mm. Mhm.
And I have a couple friends that fight for ONE FC, and they say like everything's run super professionally. Even like the way they manage like weight classes is very different. Like you have same day weigh-ins, so all of a sudden that changes,
Mhm.
which is huge because most people just suck their weight down to a certain point and then they rehydrate and they're like massive the next day.
Right, exactly.
Whereas now, like a good example is Demetrius Johnson was a UFC flyweight champion for a really long time, lost his title, got traded to ONE FC, which was the first trade ever done for fucking Ben Askren. Anyway,
Wow.
and all of a sudden he had to fight bigger guys because he couldn't do the same weight cut that he was doing before. What I liked about it was they changed his training regimen so that he just got bigger. Like he was just like a lot more muscular and just got stronger and faster as a result. I'm like, that's how it should be. That's a prime example, but he's not talked about because he's not like controversial. It doesn't hold clout in that way. He's just a nice guy.
Right.
Except when I met him, he was kind of tired that day probably, but that's
Gotcha.
fine.
Um,
But yeah,
wow, that's so interesting. Yeah, I hope it. I really appreciate you keeping it going, and continuing with this, because someday if my shoulder ever heals, I'd love to learn. But possibly before you go to Denver. So
yeah.
okay, yeah.
Well, you don't need your shoulder to kick, so that's good news. We can always
Oh, look
work
at
around it.
that. I could.
As a
Yeah.
personal trainer, you got to figure out how to adjust when people have injuries. So
Really, really. Wow, that's
yeah.
okay. Whoa. I need to hear about this. Okay, so I have terrible right shoulder, right? Terrible. It can't.
Yeah.
It gets like, even when I'm running, like it'll like start to flare up and boom. So would I be able to like go train somewhere and then still be able to use whatever
Yeah.
limbs I have left? You could kind of
I
customize.
mean, legally speaking, they have to accommodate you.
Okay.
At the same time, if they're worth their weight in salt, it's like they're gonna figure it out. So every trainer that I've ever had can work around an injury.
Really?
If you have multiple ones that are long term, then it's okay. They've got to really modify this workout. But for the most part, so you don't have a right shoulder. It's like you can punch the air. You can just go through the technique slowly. Whatever keeps that there.
Right.
Like at most, we'll tell you to keep your hand up just for the sake of technique. But even then, if you need a brace or whatever it is, I've worked around all kinds of things.
You have.
Like I've had fighters with broken arms, and they're like, I could still hit with the other one.
Huh.
And that's I don't know if it's like a fighter mentality thing. They're like, no, I'm fine. Like it's just a little broken, But for the most part, you adapt. That's the same thing with personal training. If you walk into like a Blink or whatever and be like, oh, I have a bad shoulder, and be like, maybe not shoulder day, or maybe we'll just isolate the one arm and work around it. So yeah, you can definitely adapt.
What a great philosophy. You might have changed my whole perspective on this. I've been like kind of like super not happy about the fact that I
Yeah.
can't that I've been limited physically by my shoulder and by my right knee, runner's knee. So it's not
Yeah.
nearly as bad as
Yeah,
my
I got something similar where after a certain mileage, like my right leg goes numb. So I've had to adjust the way that I run.
Wow. Yeah, but yeah,
Like I said, long-term injuries and stuff have just like beaten me over the years, and it just made me question a lot of things. But I've fought through a bunch of stuff, and
do you have any pains right now? Like as we're talking, is there anything that if you just become aware of your body and just like you could like be like, this hurts, this kind of hurts, this kind of hurts?
no, I think
good.
the only adjustment I've really noticed is like how much I'm sitting. So I'm like my back kind of sucks right now, and then, like you can sort of remedy a lot of that with yoga or stretching and just generally moving and getting up on a more regular basis. So that part I've been lazy about, but I feel like since the gym's open up, I don't really have much of an excuse right now. So it's getting back into like I went 4 months without kicking anything. Like I had a kettlebell and I was running, and I was like, I didn't hit pads, I didn't hit a bag, I had zero access to any of that stuff. So you just figure out where you're at, and then it really boils down to like what's when they talk about like what's essential, and they usually mean in the context of what's essential business, but
Right.
in a pandemic or in quarantine like this, you figure out what's essential to your life. So I talk about
Right.
that pioneer mentality. It's like, well, do I really need all these cookies? And the answer is always yes, but that's beside the point.
Right. We're gonna have to have
Yeah.
personal training talk at some point about that
Sure.
whole aspect. Thank you so much,
You
Roman.
know where to reach me, man.
Do you want to just tell everybody about your stuff, where to find you, at all the places in the world? You're out there in so many ways, right?
Yeah.
So
We
go
haven't
for
even
it.
that's funny to me that we haven't even talked about any of those things. That's
No.
like a whole like second life that we can talk about.
Right, because that's what we
Yeah.
talked about, when I started doing that world, but that's
Yeah.
another thing to whole oof. But yeah, let it
Yeah.
out, let it all. I want it all out on the podcast and on the YouTube.
So Yeah, my name is Roman Aguila. My last name is literally Spanish for eagle, and my handle is Spanish for eagle. If you Google that, you'll find me everywhere. Probably YouTube, Twitch, the whole nine. And weekly when we keep up with it. But there's a podcast called Kicking and Streaming available
Kicking and
on
streaming. I'll
Spotify,
be
eventually
listening.
iTunes, but Google Play and Anchor and a bunch of other places. But Kicking and Streaming is a semi-regular podcast. So we
You're
talk about MMA and stream stuff.
you're not. Wait,
Yeah.
wait, wait. What? Where's that podcast available? Kicking and
On
streaming.
Anchor,
Yeah.
Anchor FM. It's on Spotify. It's on a bunch of other places too.
It should
Google
be on
Play.
Anchor. If once it's on Anchor, it should be on everything basically except for Stitcher.
Yeah, they changed something that our metadata wouldn't let us on iTunes again. So we're on for a hot second, we got booted off. And I have to figure out why that is.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, gotcha. Okay,
Yeah, there's like we didn't list an author or something in like the tag file. I don't know. It was something like along those lines because they
okay.
changed something and it broke something with how we get our stuff distributed. So
I'll follow on Anchor and I'll follow on. Thank you. Continue. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to figure that out.
no,
Yeah.
those are pretty much the main things. Like I've been inactive for the past month on pretty much anything that isn't Twitter. So like Instagram, Facebook, I don't really post anything. Even streaming, I haven't really been streaming that much. So I usually just talk shit and post selfies on Twitter,
Yeah.
talk
So
about like my VR stuff and camera stuff mostly. And then I spend most of my time in other people's streams and talking to them and, playing games pretty much. Try to simplify everything. And with all this stuff happening, I've been pretty present
that's
in
great.
Twitter, and then that's it. Everything else is just either disabled or inactive. So
You feel like I've changed. We have to talk about streaming at some point, but I
yeah,
really need to ask you this question. I really do.
sure.
Um.
We'll end on
So
this. Yeah.
uh. So we our stream has changed. We hit 1 year of doing it every Friday for
Nice.
last two weeks ago, and whew, man, things changed and my mentality changed, and we don't look at I'm big on being present. I try to meditate every day, and it's important to me, right? And I
Mm,
never really, even when we started, you coached me on like how to start this. I should have known that the coaching life is the life for Roman,
yeah.
because you were coaching me to begin this, and you said so many things that really stuck with me since then. Um, namely about learning about yourself as you do it, and I learned a shoot crap ton. Um, so, we don't stream anymore with the chat. We don't look at the chat. Chat's done. Completely out of the picture for us.
Mm,
I started another stream where I'm able to multi-stream. The account went to Andrew, and I have another where I'm able to multi-stream because it's not affiliate and all that stuff. I stream only once a week now. I do it strictly for the podcast, and I do it because I want to stay present. Do you think streaming and staying present, for you, is that a point of contention? Because you play a lot of games, so you could be streaming the entire time you're
yeah.
playing those games. And for me, it's like I can't enjoy the game nearly the same way I would enjoy a game. Like I like games a lot.
Yeah.
What do you think? What
Yeah.
do you think? Has
So
that been the struggle for you? The
so this will be kind of a long answer. So we'll try to end on this note
No, go ahead.
because this
Go
should
for
this
it.
should have its own like section or own episode
Oh,
basically. But
believe it.
so part of the why I don't stream as much is like a lot of the game specifically I'm playing is Valorant right now, and I
Ah,
play
ah.
competitively. And the thing is, if you're trying to stay in the game and do your best, it's next to impossible to keep up with chat. And I value a lot of interaction within my streams, and I work a lot off of their energy, so to speak. And I try to keep that momentum going,
Mhm.
which can be exceptionally annoying to people that aren't doing that. And they're like in your chat and or in your Discord and like, dude, shut like just we're trying to make a call and stop laughing and all like
Right, right.
I have a different I
It
have a
adds a
very different
layer.
energy on stream.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. Me too. Yeah.
So when I play that game, I'm off stream.
Mhm.
Which means a lot of my time is just off stream now because I just do that.
Right.
And then sometimes I'll record highlights and stuff that I found, but for streaming, I didn't think if I don't think it's entertaining, I'm not going to stream it. And I don't think me playing Valorant is that interesting. Which is funny because as soon as I stopped streaming as much, my viewership and a bunch of other numbers went up, and I was like, interesting. I don't know why or how that changed. It might be just with community interaction. Like
Right.
I've been spending more time in other people's streams and talking to them
That helps a
and like
lot.
supporting them that way. So yeah, just like
People
spending more
respect
time
that.
with the people, well, like one on one or just like in chat and just trying to be the viewer that I would want to have for myself.
Oh, that's really
Like
nice.
the golden rule of streaming, you know?
Right, and the golden rule of life, you know what I mean? Like, but you're applying it there.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Okay, so everything can be found, your stream, your podcast, the
Spanish for Eagle
Spanish for
is
Eagle,
the best way to just
and
find everything ever.
everything, and your photography, all of that stuff.
You'll
Spanish
probably
for Eagle.
honestly you'll probably find in that also, or my name will pop up and then you can go that. I'm very present on the internet and I'm
Yeah.
trying not to be.
Okay. Yeah.
So it takes away a lot from my energy, so I'm trying to adjust.
Yeah, it does. It does. That's why I like to focus on certain things. Like, there's
Hmm.
this aspect of my life, and I'm just gonna go almost all in on this, basically, and that's it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's my life because we all are gonna die. So, yeah.
Right, man. We'll never make it out alive.
No, we won't. But Roman, this has been wonderful. I've done a couple of these, and this has been just like, yeah, this has just been great just to do this with you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to come onto my show. I know you're a very busy person, so I really appreciate it. And I will share it with you all the stuff once it's all
Yeah, man.
clicked together.
Thanks for having me. This has been
Sure.
fun.
All right, Roman. I will catch you on the flippity flip. Check out Spanish for Eagle. Google it while it's still up there before he does some DMCA takedowns on
Invariably delete
on everything.
just delete myself from the matrix real quick.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take care of yourself, bud. We'll keep in touch. All right.
Cool. Take it easy, man.
Take care.